730 days. That was the exact number Ryan had counted since the world stopped turning for him, even though the heart in his chest still reluctantly beat each disjointed rhythm. Blackwood National Forest appeared on the satellite screen like a gigantic scar on the face of the earth. Locals called the northern ravine area the dead zone, a place of sheer cliffs plunging straight down as deep as 500 meters, where even sunlight seemed hesitant to reach the bottom. No one believed a 2-year-old child could survive there for a single night, let alone 2 years. But today, the silence of the dead zone was shattered by the buzzing of an electric motor. Altitude 400 meters. Gusting winds at level 6. Boss, I'm not sure this drone can handle it. Ben, the young graduate researcher, spoke while nervously adjusting the control lever. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the low temperature inside the mobile station. Dr. Eris, head of the biological research team, did not take his eyes off the thermal imaging display mottled with patches of blue and red. He tapped his fingers against the metal table, his voice tightening. Hold that position, Ben. The thermal sensor just picked up something at X-ray coordinates. Right beneath that ancient oak tree jutting out from the cliff face. That's just an eagle's nest, Doctor. Ben frowned, struggling to keep the drone from being dragged into the abyss by the cold air current. Or a mountain monkey that got separated from its troop. Monkeys don't have body temperatures that low. Zoom in. Now. On the 4K resolution screen, the camera image zoomed in on a massive tree canopy growing precariously in midair, its roots gripping the sheer cliff like desperate claws. Suddenly, Ben screamed, nearly dropping the controller. What the hell is that? Boss, look. It's moving. On the screen, a small dark figure shot from one branch to another. It didn't climb slowly like a primate. It flew. The creature launched itself through midair, defying gravity, defying the yawning chasm below that waited to swallow everything. Is that a lemur? Eris squinted, pressing his face close to the screen. No, lemurs don't have an arm span like that. It jumped again. My God, look at that speed. Ben exclaimed in amazement. Wait. Boss. Look closely. It just used something to swing across. The drone circled, and the camera captured the moment the creature landed on a large branch. It turned its face and stared straight into the camera lens hovering 10 meters away. The space inside the mobile station seemed to freeze solid. It was not a monkey. Nor an ape. It was a human face. A face smeared with mud, long hair matted with decaying leaves, but eyes blazing sharp and cold like those of a predatory bird. It was a little girl, the muscles in her arms unnaturally well developed. And what made Eris's stomach twist was not the appearance of the child, but what she was wearing. What is that wrapped around her body? Ben stammered, his voice trembling. The small body was crisscrossed with tattered ropes, rusted hooks, and makeshift wooden pulleys. The girl did not look like a lost child, but like a puppet pulled by strings, a biological machine designed to live in the air. Call rescue. Now, Eris ordered, his voice faltering. And call the sheriff. Tell him to reopen the case file on Daisy from 2 years ago. 30 minutes later, in an empty apartment in the city, Ryan's phone rang. He picked it up, his lifeless eyes fixed on the photo of his daughter on the fireplace, a picture of chubby little Daisy learning to walk in the yard. Hello, this is Ryan. On the other end of the line was the urgent, unsettled voice of Sheriff Miller. Ryan, you need to sit down. We think we've found her. Ryan laughed, a dry, bitter laugh. He had heard this line hundreds of times from scammers trying to claim reward money. Sheriff Miller, please. It's been 2 years. If you're going to say you found bones or a piece of clothing. No, Ryan. Listen to me, Miller cut in, his tone frighteningly serious. She's alive. A biological research team just captured footage of her in the dead zone. Ryan frowned, tightening his grip on the phone. The dead zone. What the hell are you talking about? Daisy was only 2. She still tripped when she walked. How could she get down into that ravine? That's what we don't understand, Ryan. Miller hesitated, heavy breathing audible through the speaker. In the video, she isn't walking. She's flying between the trees. And Ryan, she doesn't look like Daisy anymore. Ryan stood frozen. The phone slipped slightly from his hand, but he still caught Miller's final words, the words that made his blood turn ice cold. She looked straight into the camera, Ryan. But those eyes weren't human. The blades of a National Guard Black Hawk helicopter tore through the thin air at an altitude of 1,500 meters, creating violent vortexes that slammed into the sheer cliff walls of Blackwood National Forest. But the metal beast could only roar helplessly in place, unable to descend any lower. The updrafts from the ravine were too powerful, any aerial approach would be suicide. Ryan stood at the edge of the cliff, both hands gripping the temporary barricade, bloodshot eyes locked on a high-powered binocular scope. Can't we wait for the wind to die down? Ryan shouted over the noise, turning to Sheriff Miller. We can't, Ryan. Miller shouted back, gripping his radio. Temperatures will drop below 0 when night falls. If she's really down there, she has to be brought up immediately. Alpha team will descend by rope. 5 figures from the search and rescue team began lowering themselves down the slick cliff face 500 meters below. They moved cautiously like spiders clinging to silk, heading straight for the massive ancient oak canopy suspended in midair, the place known as the Nest. Alpha 1 reporting. We've reached the target area. 20 meters from the canopy, Sergeant Cale's voice crackled over the command radio. The structure of this nest. It's very strange. It's reinforced with woven roots and, dear God, even metal framework from an old aircraft wreck. Do you see the child? Miller pressed. Not yet. The foliage is too dense. Wait. A tense silence enveloped the command station. Ryan held his breath, his heart pounding painfully against his chest. Suddenly, Cale's scream ripped through the channel. Rock fall. Rock fall. On the observation screen from the helmet-mounted camera, a cleverly camouflaged net of stones suddenly released from the canopy, raining straight down on the climbing team. The rocks weren't large, but they were heavy enough to throw the operatives off balance, swaying dangerously on their fragile ropes. It's attacking us. The child is attacking us. Cale yelled. Stay calm, Alpha. She's just a frightened 4-year-old. Miller ordered. No, you don't understand. Cale's voice cracked with disbelief. She's not scared. She's hunting. From within the dense leaves, a small dark figure burst forth, Daisy. She wasn't crying or cowering. She moved along the crisscrossing ropes around the tree with the speed of a flying squirrel. She let out piercing, razor-sharp cries that echoed across the cliff walls, yanking hard on a wooden pin. Crash. A massive bamboo cage snapped open, nearly trapping the lead rescuer. Daisy swung on a rope, delivered a hooked kick to the soldier's helmet, then sprang back to a high branch, her eyes blazing with feral hostility. Don't shoot. Absolutely do not shoot. Ryan lunged forward, snatching the radio from Miller's hand, screaming in desperation. That's my daughter. Daisy, it's Dad. It's Dad. Ryan's voice was swallowed by the howling wind. Daisy seemed not to hear, or not to understand that language. The little girl bared her teeth, bracing herself like a mother animal defending its territory. But just as the situation reached its most chaotic point, a strange sound rang out, cutting through the roar of the wind and the shouting. Toot. Taya. Toot. It was a whistle. Not a police whistle, but a sharp, commanding signal whistle. Immediately, Daisy froze in midair. She had been in a position ready to leap into an attack, but suddenly she drew herself in, clinging tightly to the tree trunk, her eyes turning toward the pitch-black hidden corner of the oak's canopy. Where did that sound come from? Miller frowned. Alpha 1 reporting. Kale's voice dropped to a tense whisper. We see it now. There's a second person in that nest. Kale's camera zoomed in on the darkest corner of the treetop. There, suspended on a hanging chair fashioned from parachute cord and animal hide, was a man. He was emaciated, nothing but skin and bones, with disheveled white hair and beard covering his face. He sat motionless, his hollow eyes staring fixedly at the intruding soldiers. And the most horrifying detail, the legs of his trousers hung limp, swaying in the wind. He had no legs. He raised a small whistle to his mouth. Taya. Toot. The moment the whistle stopped, Daisy immediately released the next rock trap's latch. She flipped once, swung back toward the legless man, stood in front of him, and spread her arms wide in a protective stance. Ryan watched the scene through his binoculars, feeling as if someone were crushing his windpipe. His daughter was not acting on instinct. She was acting on commands. With every whistle he blew short, long, broken, Daisy changed posture, from attack to defense, from aggression to vigilance. She was the arrow, and the crippled man was the one drawing the bow. He's controlling her. Ryan whispered, then shouted, his voice breaking with terror and overwhelming rage. Miller. Do you see this? He's turned my daughter into a pet. He trained her. On the cliff face, the sniper team had taken position. Red laser dots began dancing across the legless man's chest. Target in sight, a cold voice came through the earpiece. Awaiting orders. 2. Shoot him. Shoot him before he orders her to do something reckless. Ryan screamed, eyes bloodshot, fingers stabbing toward the man sitting on that grotesque hanging chair. Miller hesitated for a second, sweat streaming down his temples. He stared at the screen, the little girl baring her teeth to shield her captor, while the captor calmly raised the whistle to his lips again. Hold. Miller ordered. Don't shoot. If he dies, the child may jump off the cliff after him. In the howling wind of the dead zone, the whistle sounded again, toot, toot. And Daisy, instead of attacking, suddenly stepped back and obediently crouched beneath the man's chair, though her eyes remained locked on the rescue team with open hostility. The rescue had turned into an unimaginable standoff. The stark white fluorescent lights of City General Hospital buzzed faintly, a monotonous sound that induced nausea. In complete contrast to the chaos on the cliff 3 hours earlier, this place was steeped in a terrifying sterile silence. Ryan and Sarah rushed down the corridor of the intensive care unit. Sarah clutched a worn brown teddy bear to her chest, the toy Daisy had hugged every night before she disappeared. Stay calm, Ryan panted, gripping his wife's shoulders, even though his own hands were shaking uncontrollably. The police separated that disabled man already. Now it's just Daisy. She's safe. Did you see the way she looked at us earlier, Ryan? Sarah sobbed, her voice shattering. She looked at me like I was a monster. That's just shock. The doctor said she needs time. Ryan shoved open the door to room 402. The couple froze. The room was empty. The pristine white hospital bed stood bare in the center, sheets smooth, without a single wrinkle from a body. The advanced medical machines around it still hummed, but the sensor leads dangled limply onto the floor. Where is she? Sarah screamed, dropping the teddy bear to the floor. They said she was here. Ryan. They lost her again. Ryan rushed into the room, tore through the sheets, looked under the bed, then ran into the bathroom. Empty. Doctor. Nurse. Ryan roared, turning to charge out. But a strange sound stopped him cold. Click, click, grr. The sound came from above. Not the air conditioner. It was the sound of fingernails lightly scraping metal. Ryan slowly raised his head, looking toward the corner of the ceiling where the curtain rail was mounted. And his breath caught in his chest. Daisy had not disappeared. She was there. Not lying on the bed. Not sitting in a chair. Daisy was clinging to the thin aluminum curtain rail near the ceiling. Her hands and feet gripped the metal tightly, her body curled inward, hanging upside down like a bat in hibernation. Her eyes were wide open, unnaturally alert, gleaming in the dim light, fixed on her parents with extreme wariness. "My God! Daisy!" Sarah whispered, raising a hand to cover her mouth to stifle a scream of horror. "What are you doing up there? Come down to Mommy." Daisy did not answer. She tilted her head and made a strange sound in her throat. Click. Click. "She doesn't understand what you're saying." A deep voice spoke from the doorway. Dr. Evans, a behavioral psychology specialist, stepped into the room holding a thick medical file. He signaled to the two nurses outside, then gently closed the door. "Doctor, what the hell is going on?" Ryan spun around, pointing at the ceiling. "Why isn't anyone getting her down?" "We've tried, Mr. Ryan," Dr. Evans said calmly, his voice heavy with concern. "That's why I had to call you both in immediately. Look closely at your daughter." Ryan stepped closer, looking up at his tiny child. Under the lights, he saw the horrifying changes in her body. Daisy was thin, but the muscles in her arms and thighs bulged, firm and defined like those of a professional gymnast. But the strangest thing was her hips. Her pelvis seemed to have changed, widening abnormally, making her squatting posture appear far more natural than standing upright. "Daisy, it's Dad." Ryan choked back tears, holding out his arms. "Dad will catch you. Come down, sweetheart. The bed is soft. It's not cold like up there." Daisy looked at her father's hands, then down at the gleaming white tiled floor. Suddenly, her pupils constricted. Her breathing became rapid. "Come on, be good." Ryan coaxed patiently, stepping forward to grab her foot. The moment Ryan's fingers touched Daisy's ankle, she screamed. A piercing scream, not like a child crying, but like the shriek of a wild animal driven into a corner. Daisy recoiled, yanking her leg free from Ryan's hand, then, lightning fast, scrambled along the curtain rail to the opposite wall, her fingernails scraping the surface until they bled in search of a grip. "No. No." Sarah rushed forward, wrapping her arms around her husband to stop him. "You're frightening her. I just want to bring my child down." Ryan shouted helplessly. "She's human. She has to lie on a bed." "That is exactly the problem, Mr. Ryan." Dr. Evans spoke up, pushing his glasses back up the bridge of his nose. "To the child as she is now, your soft bed, or that flat floor, is a killing ground." "What do you mean?" Ryan panted, turning to look at the doctor. "We took X-rays and conducted a full examination." Evans flipped open the file, pointing at the skeletal scans. "The results are extraordinary and terrifying. The child has not been abused or starved in the conventional sense. On the contrary, her survival indices are higher than any 5-year-old I've ever encountered. But look at the brain structure. What's wrong with her?" Sarah asked, trembling. "Daisy's brain has been completely reprogrammed over the past 2 years, Evans said, his voice dropping into something ominous. "She no longer thinks like a human who lives on the ground, a ground human. In her world, that world up in the trees, the ground equals death. Falling is death. Touching the ground is death. So that's why she won't come down." Ryan looked at his daughter clinging tightly to the corner of the wall, trembling yet resolute, refusing to let her feet touch the floor. "Exactly," Evans nodded. "To Daisy, this tiled floor is no different from a lake of molten lava. She only feels safe when suspended. When her feet are not touching the ground. Then that man." Ryan clenched his fists, his anger flaring again. "That one-legged man named Leo. He turned my daughter into a monster afraid of the ground?" Or, Evans hesitated, closing the file and looking straight into Ryan's eyes. He turned her into the only being capable of surviving beside a disabled man deep in the forest. "This Delos." "What do you mean?" Daisy can't speak human language, but she constantly makes clicking sounds in her throat. Evans gestured toward Daisy. That isn't meaningless. It's echolocation, spatial navigation through echoes. Like bats. She uses it to measure distance in the dark while moving through the trees. Ryan was stunned. He looked up toward the corner of the room. Daisy was still clinging there, her eyes wild yet alert. She parted her lips, and once again the sound. Click, click, echoed, bouncing off the stark white walls. We separated the child from that man, Evans continued, his voice heavy with concern. But I fear we've made a grave mistake. We separated the wings from the brain. And Daisy, she's waiting for an order. What order? Sarah asked. An order to survive, Evans replied. Because in her eyes right now, this hospital is more dangerous than the primeval forest. The interrogation room was suffocating, reeking of bleach and the weight of unanswered questions. Ryan sat across from Leo, the gaunt, disabled man with disheveled gray hair and beard. Leo's hands were cuffed to the table, his hollow eyes fixed unblinkingly on Ryan. He had not spoken a single word since being brought up from the abyss. Your name is Leo, isn't it? Ryan began, his voice hoarse from holding back his rage. The police say you were there with my daughter for 2 years. Leo did not answer, only slightly inclined his head. 2 years. 2 years, do you understand? Ryan slammed his fist down on the metal table, producing a piercing clang. She was only 2 when she disappeared. She was a child. What the hell did you do to her? Train her like an ape, teach her to fly through the air like a puppet? Why? You're sick. Leo remained silent, but something flickered in his eyes that Ryan couldn't read, resignation, or contempt. Why didn't you try to send word? Ryan pressed on, jumping to his feet. How could you hide her for so long without anyone knowing? If you were truly trapped, why didn't you write a distress message on the ground, on the rocks, or light a fire? Leo continued to look at Ryan. He slowly shook his head, then used his thumb, the only finger not cuffed, to point at a battered canvas backpack lying on the table. Sheriff Miller, leaning against the wall, signaled for an officer to open it. Inside were a few sets of tattered clothes, an empty pouch of rations, and a small object carefully wrapped in filthy cloth. As the officer pulled the items out, a small metal object fell onto the table with a dry clink. Ryan frowned and picked it up. It was a tarnished identification tag, the strap torn halfway through, but the inscription was still clearly visible. Captain Leo Vance, Air Rescue Squadron No. 4. Ryan froze, his hand trembling violently. He looked up at the disabled man, then turned to Miller with a stunned expression. Miller. The metal framework reinforcing that nest. It came from his aircraft wreck. Ryan whispered, his voice breaking. This is Leo Vance. The pilot of the rescue helicopter that went missing in the storm years ago. They said he flew straight into the heart of the storm to search for a group of stranded climbers. Leo did not respond, only slowly nodded, his eyes heavy with memories of that fateful day, the day the cockpit became a crushing trap for his legs, turning a hero of the skies into a cripple stranded in the vast wilderness. The officer continued removing the carefully wrapped object. It was a notebook. Not leather-bound. It was a bundle of torn pages stitched together with plant fibers, the cover made from a piece of dried oak bark. Inside, lines of text written in charcoal and dried blood, interspersed with crude drawings on scraps of ration packaging or withered leaves. It was a diary. What is this? Ryan snatched up the diary. What did you use this for? Scribbling for fun? Or your treasure map? Leo let out a faint sigh, a hoarse rasp escaping his damaged throat. He reached his hand toward Ryan, slowly and firmly, signaling him to read. Ryan reluctantly opened the diary. The handwriting was crude and hard to decipher, as if written in near darkness under extreme conditions. He began reading aloud, his voice initially filled with suspicion, but gradually swallowed by the truth unfolding before him. Day 1, Ryan Reed. Found the little one trapped in the canopy. Crying non-stop. A major slip on the branch. My electric winch is broken. I don't have legs to climb down and carry her up. Radio signal dead. Damn it. Damn it. Ryan paused and looked at Leo. His eyes narrowed. You were in an accident? You lost your legs? Leo simply nodded. Ryan continued reading, his voice beginning to soften. Day 30. Supplies gone. The girl refuses to eat. She'll die if she just sits and waits. I have to teach her to move to collect rainwater on leaves, to reach small berries. I have to use safety lines from my clothes to secure her. It's too hard. Wait, Ryan said, staring at an illustration beside the text, a crude diagram of a safety harness tightly fastened around a small stick figure, connected to a main rope. You used your own clothes to make a safety harness for her. Leo remained silent, but his eyes were fixed on the diary. Day 100, Ryan read on, each word like a knife plunging into his chest. The ground is death. If she falls, she dies. I have to be strict. I can't let her think she can rely entirely on me. I must turn fear into discipline. No crying. No fear. Only grip. Only fly. Ryan looked up at Leo, his face drained of color. You taught her not to cry. You turned fear into discipline. Leo gently closed his eyes, as if in pain at hearing those words again. Ryan flipped another page. More detailed drawings appeared, Leo designing a pulley system from rotten wood and animal hide. Beside it was Daisy swinging through the air, reaching for a cluster of wild berries. Another drawing showed Leo starving himself, his ration carefully placed on a large leaf and pushed toward Daisy. The acrobatic drills Ryan had found horrifying on the camera, the flips and dizzying movements among the branches were, in reality, a series of complex physical therapy exercises to prevent Daisy's muscles from atrophying and to keep her joints flexible. Day 365. Ryan continued reading, his voice trembling. She called me ringmaster. I taught her echolocation in the dark. She is alive. She is strong. But I am slowly dying. I cannot let her see that I am afraid. She needs a steady guide. Ryan let the diary fall limply onto the table. The interrogation room seemed to sink into a thick, suffocating silence. He looked at Leo, at the frail disabled man sitting there, his eyes still unmoving, but now Ryan could read something else in them, not contempt, but immense pain and sacrifice. You didn't kidnap her, Ryan whispered, his voice breaking. You saved her. And you taught her how to survive. When you couldn't move. Leo nodded faintly, a tear rolling down his hollow cheek. Ryan clutched his head and collapsed forward onto the table. The kidnapper was not Leo. The kidnapper was the cruel hand of fate that had trapped two unfortunate human beings in a horrific snare deep in the forest. And Leo, with his disability, could not become a traditional father who carried a child on his back or soothed her in his arms. He became a harsh teacher, a ruthless trainer, a terrifying ringmaster in the eyes of outsiders, solely to ensure that Daisy, a 2-year-old child, could become the only zero-gravity warrior capable of existing above the abyss. You created another world for her, Ryan said, lifting his eyes to Leo, no longer filled with anger but with pain and shock. You turned my daughter into something, no longer human. Leo only looked at him, his aged eyes weary but resolute. In that gaze, Ryan realized a truth even more horrifying than what he had just read. Leo had not only taught Daisy how to fly. He had taught her how to live, how to exist without the ground beneath her feet. And perhaps, over the past 2 years, that was all Daisy had ever known. The alarm siren tore through the hospital's quiet night, but this time it did not signal a medical emergency. It signaled an escape. When Ryan burst out of the ground floor elevator, the scene before him was pure chaos. Hundreds of people, patients, nurses, security guards, and pedestrians were gathered in the courtyard, craning their necks upward, pointing and screaming in terror. Police spotlights swept wildly across the slick glass facade of the 15-story building. "Ryan! Up here! Hurry!" Sarah's shrill scream snapped Ryan back to reality. His wife stood trembling beside a fire truck, one hand clamped over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "What's happening? Where is she?" Ryan shouted, forcing his way through the crowd. She's climbing," Sarah sobbed, pointing straight up. "She thinks the building is a cliff." Ryan followed her finger. At the height of the 10th floor, where the hospital's massive LED sign flashed the words, "Emergency," a small dark shape was moving. It was Daisy. She had broken out through the hospital room window. To a child raised in the dead zone, the steady beeping of a heart monitor was more terrifying than the roar of wild beasts, and her survival instincts had driven her to escape not downward to the ground, but upward. Daisy moved along narrow ledges using only 2 fingers, leaping nimbly across air conditioning units as if they were rocks jutting from a cliff face. In her eyes, the tangled electrical cables were jungle vines, and the blinding neon lights were moonlight guiding her path. "Don't scare her. Turn the sirens off. Turn them all off." Police Chief Miller shouted into his radio, sweat pouring down his face. But it was too late. A sudden gust of wind slammed into the building, carrying moisture from the drizzle that was beginning to fall heavily. The glass and metal surface of the billboard became slick, as if coated in grease. Daisy reached out to grab the iron bar forming the letter H of the sign. Screech. The sound of rubber slipping on glass rang out harshly. The crowd below screamed in unison. Daisy lost her footing. Her small body was flung off the ledge, falling freely for nearly 2 meters before her right hand managed to hook onto the razor-sharp edge of the billboard's metal frame. "Daisy!" Ryan and Sarah screamed together, their heart-rending cries echoing between the high-rise buildings. Daisy's entire body dangled in midair, more than 30 meters above the cold concrete ground. Blood began to seep from her palm, mixing with rainwater as it streamed down her thin wrist. But what chilled Ryan to the bone was not the slip itself. It was his daughter's reaction. Daisy did not cry. She did not call out, "Mommy." She did not thrash in panic. Hanging on the edge of death, Daisy was completely motionless. She hung suspended, eyes tightly shut, focusing all her hearing on the chaotic space around her. She was waiting. Ryan grabbed a handheld loudspeaker from a police officer and screamed in desperation. "Daisy! Listen to me. Pull yourself up. Push off the wall with your feet. You can do it. Please." Up above, Daisy opened her eyes. She looked down at Ryan. But in that gaze there was only emptiness and confusion. Words like pull up and push off the wall were utterly meaningless to a child whose brain had been reprogrammed. The language of the ground people could not apply to the rules of the sky. She shook her head, lips pressed tight, continuing to strain her ears. "Why isn't she moving?" Sarah grabbed Ryan's shirt, screaming through her tears. "Why is she just hanging there? Her hand is bleeding, Ryan. She doesn't understand me." Ryan let the loudspeaker drop, helplessness crushing his heart. "She isn't waiting for encouragement. She's waiting for orders." He remembered the diary. Day 100, if she falls, she dies. Fear must be turned into discipline. Daisy was not afraid of death. She was only afraid of performing the technique incorrectly. She was waiting for the commander, the ringmaster, to tell her which angle was safe to release, what wind force was sufficient to swing to the next metal bar. And Ryan, her biological father, a man with both legs intact and limitless love, was utterly useless in his daughter's world. "She's going to let go," Chief Miller said, his voice shaking. "Her muscles are tiring. We have to deploy the air cushion immediately. It's useless." Ryan spun around, grabbing Miller by the collar, his eyes blazing with madness. If she sees the air cushion, she'll think it's a trap. She'll jump in another direction to avoid it. You don't understand her. Then what do you want me to do? Stand here and watch her fall. Miller shouted back. Ryan released him, stepping back, gasping for breath. He looked up at the lone speck clinging to life above, then down at the tattered diary clenched in his hand. A painful but singular decision formed in his mind. No, Ryan said, his voice dropping, cold and resolute. I can't save her. You can't save her. Only one person can. Who? Miller asked blankly. Ryan pointed toward the police transport van parked at the corner of the courtyard, where the suspect was still being held. Release him, Ryan ordered, his voice sharp as a blade. Bring Leo here. Immediately. You're insane. He's a kidnapping suspect. He's the father of the sky inside my daughter. Ryan roared, tears streaming down his face twisted in agony. She doesn't need her parents right now. She needs his whistle. Bring him here before my daughter lets go. Miller looked at Ryan, then looked up at the child who was beginning to slowly slip from the rain-soaked metal bar. He clenched his teeth, turned to his subordinates, and shouted, "Open the vehicle. Bring the suspect out. Hurry." The rear door of the police van burst open with a dry slam. Two officers hurriedly carried an old wheelchair down onto the rain-soaked pavement. Leo sat there, hunched in oversized prison clothes, gray hair matted and stuck to his forehead, but his eyes, the eyes of an old wolf, lit up brightly as he looked toward the small dark speck teetering high above. The noisy crowd suddenly fell silent. A strange stillness enveloped the concrete courtyard, broken only by the whistling wind and the patter of rain. Take the handcuffs off him. Ryan rushed forward, yanking the arm of the hesitant officer. Do it. If he can't blow the whistle, the girl will fall. But safety protocol. What protocol at a time like this? Take them off. Miller roared, cutting him off. The clinking of metal rang out. Leo's thin, scarred hands were freed. He didn't rub his aching wrists, nor did he look at Ryan or anyone else. He reached into the chest pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small object made of glossy black ebony, smooth from constant friction. The whistle. Leo rolled his wheelchair forward, tilted his head back, and looked up at the height of 30 meters, where Daisy was trembling as she clung to the razor-sharp metal edge. He didn't use a loudspeaker. He raised the whistle to his cracked lips. Tweet. Tweet. Taya. A strange, piercing combination of sounds tore through the curtain of rain, echoing off the glass walls of the high-rise building. It didn't sound like any police whistle, but like the call of a predatory bird summoning its kind. Above, Daisy's reaction was immediate and shocking. Her body, rigid with panic just moments before, suddenly went limp. Her shoulders relaxed. Her head lifted, and her jet-black eyes locked onto the man in the wheelchair below. She recognized the sound. It was the call of the ringmaster, the master of the game. In Daisy's young mind, already reprogrammed, that whistle meant absolute safety. My God, she's responding. Miller whispered, unable to believe his eyes. Tell her to climb inside. Or tell her to wait for the rescue ladder. But Leo did not do that. He took a deep breath, his narrow chest rising, and blew a new sequence of sounds, short, rapid, and decisive. Tweet, tweet. Tweet, tweet. Daisy released one hand from the metal bar. She turned her body outward toward the vast open space, her back facing the safety of the wall. She began to swing her small body to build momentum. Ryan's eyes bulged, blood rushing to his head. He recognized the movement. It was the preparation for a jump. What are you doing? Ryan lunged at Leo, grabbing his collar and shaking him violently. Are you telling her to jump? That's the 10th floor. Are you trying to kill her? Ryan. Stop. Sarah screamed, rushing forward and wrapping her arms tightly around her husband's waist, pulling him back. "Look! Look down there!" Ryan followed the direction of his wife's pointing hand. Directly beneath Daisy's position, about 3 meters down, was the balcony of the 9th floor. But the horizontal distance was more than 2 meters, an impossible jump for a 5-year-old child under slippery conditions. "It's impossible," Ryan stammered, his face drained of all color. "She'll slip, she'll smash her head on the railing." Leo paid no attention to the chaos around him. He brushed Ryan's hand aside, his eyes still locked on the child. He raised his right hand high, waiting for the exact moment when the wind died down. Then he slashed his hand downward decisively, accompanied by a long, shrill whistle. "Tiaz!" Above. Daisy let go. "No!" Ryan and hundreds of people below screamed in unison. But Daisy did not fall like a stone. She launched herself into the air in the posture of a flying squirrel, limbs spread wide to catch the wind, eyes wide open, locking onto her landing point. The moment she struck the railing of the 9th floor balcony, Ryan squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the sound of breaking bones. But there was no violent impact. Only a soft thud. Daisy had grabbed the edge of the railing, and immediately, by reflexes drilled into her by Leo over 700 days in the deep forest, she curled her body, rolled once onto the balcony floor to dissipate the impact. A perfect landing, clean, precise, and highly technical. She's alive. Miller let his radio fall limp in his hand, his mouth hanging open. "I've never seen anything like that." Daisy stood up, shook the rain from her hair, then leaned over the railing, looking down and letting out a shrill cry, "Cree! Cree!" 2 minutes later, the elevator doors opened. The rescue team brought Daisy down to the main lobby. "Daisy. My baby." Ryan and Sarah burst forward, breaking through the police barrier. They threw their arms wide, ready to welcome their little daughter back from the brink of death. Ryan had imagined this moment thousands of times. She would burst into tears, throw herself into his arms, and he would swear never to let go again. But reality was more brutal than any nightmare. When she saw Ryan rushing toward her, Daisy hissed a warning, bared her tiny teeth, and stepped back. She looked at her biological parents as if they were dangerous, alien creatures. "Daisy? It's Dad." Ryan froze, his hand still extended in midair, his heart feeling as though it were being crushed. Daisy slipped through the narrow gap between 2 police officers. She didn't run away. She ran straight toward the wheelchair. Leo was still sitting there, silent, gripping the whistle tightly. Daisy hurled herself into the lap of the disabled man, burying her head in his thin, sweat-soaked chest. She trembled, not from cold, but from overwhelming relief. Her small hands clutched the hem of Leo's prison uniform, her mouth continuously making soft, affectionate click, click sounds. Leo bent down, his rough hand gently stroking the child's rain-soaked hair. He said nothing, only softly patting the trembling back. An invisible bond, stronger than steel, wrapped around the 2 strange humans, completely separating them from the civilized world around them. Ryan stood frozen in the cold drizzle. Behind him, Sarah covered her mouth, sobbing in pain. He looked at the scene, his own daughter seeking shelter in the arms of the kidnapper. And in that moment of absolute agony, Ryan understood a bitter truth. "Do you see it now, Ryan?" Miller stepped closer, his voice heavy with regret. "You're the one who gave birth to her. But that man, he's the one who kept her breathing." Ryan nodded slowly, tears mingling with rain, salty on his lips. He realized he was the unnecessary one. He had legal rights, blood ties, but he didn't have the whistle. He didn't have the language of the sky. The rescue was a success. They had brought Daisy's body back to the ground. But her soul was still suspended somewhere among the treetops, in the arms of the legless man. 6 months later. The backyard of Ryan and Sarah's house was no longer a neatly trimmed green lawn like the other homes in this quiet suburban neighborhood. Instead, it looked like an action movie set, or more precisely, a miniature jungle ecosystem recreated in the middle of the city. Thick ropes were stretched crisscross, linking the garage roof to the old oak tree. Heavy-duty nets were rigged at a height of 3 meters. And in the corner of the yard, a wooden observation platform had been built precariously, recreating the very same nest at the Blackwood abyss. Ryan set the hammer down, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and looked up at the structure he had spent the entire summer building. "Do you think that carabiner point is strong enough?" Sarah stepped out from the kitchen door, holding 2 glasses of iced lemonade, her worried eyes fixed on the complex pulley system above. "It's so high, Ryan. If she slips." Ryan took the glass, smiling reassuringly at his wife, even though a vague fear still lingered in his heart. "Did you forget? Our daughter doesn't slip. She only slips when she's forced to walk." Just then, the sliding screen door opened. Daisy stepped outside. She had grown taller, her complexion rosy again, no longer bearing the gaunt, hollow look from 6 months earlier. Daisy wore a bright yellow floral dress the color of sunlight, but her feet were bare. In her hands was a brand new pair of pink sneakers, which she held as if they were an unpleasant foreign object. Daisy walked on tiptoe, the balls of her feet touching the ground cautiously, like a cat testing unfamiliar terrain. She passed right by her parents and went straight to the base of the old oak tree, where a man was sitting in a modern electric wheelchair. Leo? He had been clean-shaven, his silver hair neatly trimmed, wearing a fresh, clean plaid shirt. Though his legs were gone, the presence of a ringmaster, the master of ceremonies, still radiated from his sharp eyes. Daisy dropped the shoes onto the grass, squatted beside the wheel of Leo's chair, and looked up at him expectantly. She made the familiar sound, click, click. Leo said nothing. He reached out and patted Daisy's head, then pointed up into the tree, where a bronze wind chime hung. He raised the old wooden whistle to his lips. Toot. Tee. "He's starting again," Sarah whispered, resting her head on Ryan's shoulder. "I still can't get used to that whistle. It makes me remember that rainy night." "That's their language, Sarah," Ryan replied softly, wrapping an arm around his wife. "We can't take it away. If we take away the whistle, we'll lose her forever. They take to life." The moment the whistle ended, Daisy shot up the oak tree. No ladder needed. Her small fingers, hard as steel, latched onto the artificial wooden grips Ryan had installed. In a blink, she was 5 meters high, swinging onto a rope and performing a spectacular flip to tap the wind chime. Clink, clink. The chime rang out clear and bright. Daisy laughed a radiant, wild, and free smile, the freest Ryan had ever seen. She perched on the highest branch, legs dangling in midair, eyes narrowed toward the distant horizon, where the mountains of Blackwood National Forest were now only faint purple smudges. Ryan stepped closer to Leo. He placed a hand on the shoulder of the man he had once seen as an enemy, as a kidnapping monster. "Thank you, Leo," Ryan said sincerely, "for helping me design this backyard. She loves it." Leo looked up, his aged eyes shining with gratitude. He pulled a small scrap of paper from his breast pocket, scribbled a few words, and handed it to Ryan. His loss of speech was permanent, but communication between the two men had now moved beyond words. Ryan read the line, "She misses the forest. But she loves this place. Because this place has both the sky and the ground." The ground. Ryan chuckled softly, glancing at the pink shoes lying carelessly on the grass. "We're still trying to convince her to wear shoes. Her kindergarten teacher complains that Daisy always climbs onto the filing cabinets during nap time." Leo let out a raspy sound, his shoulders shaking. He was laughing. He pointed at the shoes, then gestured with his hands like wings. Ryan understood. "You mean, don't force her?" Ryan asked. Leo nodded firmly. He lifted the whistle and blew a short signal, toot toot. Up above, Daisy heard the command. She didn't climb down. She clipped a safety line to her waist, then released herself, sliding along the zip line that ran from the tree to the house awning, landing lightly right in front of Ryan. "Daddy," Daisy called. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. 6 months had passed, but every time he heard Daddy from her lips, he felt the same emotion as the very first time. "Daddy's here, warrior." Ryan knelt to her eye level. "Leo says I have to put my shoes on if I want ice cream," Daisy pouted, pointing at the old man grinning in his wheelchair. "But shoes make my feet unable to breathe. My feet go blind when I wear shoes." "Feet go blind?" Sarah laughed, stepping over to wipe sweat from her daughter's forehead. "Why do you say that?" "Because I can't feel the ground trembling," Daisy explained seriously. "When I'm barefoot, I know someone is coming from far away. With shoes on, it's too quiet. It's scary." Ryan looked at his daughter, then at Leo. Suddenly he realized something profound. All this time, he and Sarah had been trying to heal Daisy, trying to pull her back into being a normal child. But they were wrong. Daisy was not broken. She was an upgrade. She possessed senses and skills that ordinary humans had lost thousands of years ago. "All right." Ryan stood up and picked up the shoes. He didn't make her put them on. He tied the laces together and hung them around Daisy's neck like a piece of jewelry. "How about this deal?" Ryan winked. "You don't have to wear shoes in the yard. But when we go out, you have to wear them around your neck too, to camouflage yourself. So people won't know you're a flying superhero, okay?" Daisy's eyes lit up. "Camouflage? Like the chameleon Leo told me about?" "Exactly. You're a chameleon." Ryan ruffled her hair. "Now, who wants chocolate ice cream?" Me. Daisy shouted, but she didn't run into the kitchen. She hopped onto the railing, grabbed the drainpipe, and climbed up to the second floor to enter the house through her bedroom window. It was her favorite shortcut. Ryan watched the small figure move swiftly away, a strange feeling swelling in his chest. No more pain. No more regret. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, taking her husband's hand. "More than okay," Ryan replied, glancing at Leo. "We found her, but we never truly brought her completely back to the ground. And maybe we shouldn't." "Why?" "Because," Ryan looked up at the deep blue sky, where Daisy had just made her final jump of the day, "while we taught her how to walk so she wouldn't trip, he jerked his head toward Leo. "He taught her how to fly so she would never fear the abyss." Leo sat in his wheelchair, fingers turning the wooden whistle over and over. He looked at Ryan, then up at the second floor window where Daisy was waving. A gentle breeze passed through the garden, swaying the ropes and nets, creating a soft, creaking melody. Daisy stood there on the windowsill, the wind tossing her long hair. She didn't look at the bowl of ice cream waiting in the kitchen. She looked far away, toward the horizon, her eyes sharp and wild. She knew she belonged to two worlds. One world with parents, ice cream, and camouflage shoes. And another world, where gravity was zero, where she and the ringmaster had defeated death. And no matter which world she was in, Daisy knew one thing for certain: she would never fall again. Because now, she had both the wings of the sky and the safe harbor of the earth.